The transport truck kicked up a wall of sand as it pulled away from Outpost Delta, leaving Maya standing alone in the brown haze. She didn't shield her eyes or cough like the other new arrivals had. She just waited for the dust to settle, her gear bag slung over one shoulder, her uniform already darkened with sweat from the flight over. Sergeant First Class Carter watched from the command post doorway, clipboard in hand. He'd seen plenty of transfers come through over the past 18 months. Soldiers rotating out of forward positions, replacements filling gaps, the endless churn of military logistics. But something about this one made him pause. Her movements were economical, purposeful. No wasted energy, no nervous glancing around to get her bearings. Just a woman in her late 20s, face neutral, waiting to be processed. "Maya Rodriguez," he called out as she approached. "Yes, Sergeant," she answered. Her voice was quiet, even-toned, the kind that didn't carry across a room. "Welcome to Outpost Delta. I'm Sergeant Carter. You'll be working signals with us. Let me show you the barracks first." She nodded and followed him across the dusty compound. The outpost wasn't large, a cluster of hardened structures, concertina wire, watchtowers, a motor pool, a chow hall. About 60 soldiers total, split between combat and support roles. They passed a group of privates doing equipment maintenance. A few eyes tracked them as they walked by. By dinner time, everyone knew a new soldier had arrived. And by the next morning, they had opinions. "She doesn't talk," Private First Class Jensen observed, watching Maya move silently through the chow line. "Just takes her food and sits alone. Probably doesn't speak English that well," offered Corporal Reeves, who was on his second deployment. "Might be a language thing. Or she's just weird." Jensen shrugged. The signals section was a small operations room tucked into one of the concrete buildings. Computer terminals, communication equipment, wall-mounted maps, always someone on duty monitoring frequencies. It wasn't glamorous work. It wasn't combat. It was the kind of job that support personnel did, the kind that didn't get you noticed, didn't get you decorated, didn't get you anywhere except through another rotation and out. Maya took to it like she'd been doing it her entire life. She learned the equipment faster than any new operator they'd had in years. Asked precise questions, made no small talk. By the third day, the other signalmen had stopped trying to chat with her during breaks and simply let her work in silence. But the infantry platoon, the actual combat soldiers who use the signals equipment to coordinate operations, they weren't as forgiving. "Rodriguez, where's the status report on the eastern perimeter sensors?" Lieutenant Sarah Brennan asked on her third day. Maya had the file ready. She handed it over without comment. "You always this quiet, or you just not happy to be here?" "I'm here to do my job, ma'am," Maya said. Brennan wasn't hostile, just testing. That was a command thing, seeing if soldiers would engage, show personality, prove they belonged. Maya gave her nothing to work with. That became the pattern. She was competent. Maybe more than competent, but she was an island. The soldiers in the platoon had their routines, their banter, their hierarchy of inside jokes and shared experience. Maya didn't participate. She ate alone. She worked her shifts. She cleaned her rifle with the same methodical focus she applied to everything else. It was Private James Warner who started it, though probably not on purpose. "Hey, Rodriguez, you coming to PT tomorrow morning?" "I'll be there," she said. "Cool. We run 4 miles, then hit the obstacle course. Fair warning, the push-ups in the mud get a lot of people." She just nodded. The next morning, she finished the run 3 minutes ahead of everyone else, not even breathing hard. The obstacle course she cleared with no problems. By the evening, the story had shifted. "She's just trying to make the rest of us look bad," Warner said to whoever was listening in the barracks. "Like she's got something to prove." "Maybe she's trying to get promoted faster," Jensen added. "New private always going hard, you know, trying to impress the officers." "Nah, there's something off about her," Reeves said. "She doesn't sweat like a normal person. You ever notice her face? Like nothing bothers her. That's not normal." The comments didn't get meaner yet. They were still in the observation phase, the testing phase. But Maya felt them the way you feel a change in weather, a shift in pressure, a cooling wind. She'd been through this before, arrived places where she didn't fit, where questions were asked about her background, where people sensed something was off even when they couldn't articulate what. She never offered explanations. On her 5th day, she was filing a status report when Sergeant Carter called her into his office. Small room, no windows, just a desk and filing cabinets. A personnel file lay open on his desk. She recognized it immediately. The manila folder was hers. He'd pulled her complete records. "I'm reviewing your background," he said matter-of-factly. "Your file indicates you transferred from overseas. Honorable discharge, then re-enlisted as a private. That's unusual." "Yes, Sergeant. But your file is sealed above my clearance level, which is also unusual." He studied her face, looking for something. Some reaction, some tell. "You going to explain that?" "No, Sergeant," she said. "I'm not." He held her gaze for a long moment. Not hostile, but testing, measuring. "All right. Dismissed." She left without waiting to be told twice. By that evening, the rumors had started. Sealed file. Officer-level clearance. Something in her background that couldn't be discussed. The soldiers weren't hostile anymore. They were curious, uncertain, and uncertainty made them meaner. "Probably did something classified," Warner said, running the theory past the others. "Like a security violation or something. Or she's some kind of intelligence officer undercover," Jensen offered. "Undercover as what? A signals operator?" Reeves was skeptical. "That doesn't make sense." "Nothing about her makes sense," Warner countered. "But something's wrong. You can feel it." Maya heard none of this directly. She didn't need to. She could read it in how they stopped talking when she entered a room, how they sat slightly farther away at meals, how they watched her with a mixture of suspicion and intrigue, like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. She cleaned her rifle. She stood her watches. She remained completely, utterly invisible, which was exactly what she'd wanted when she arrived. But invisibility in a military outpost was never going to last. On the 7th day, everything changed. It started as distant sounds from the eastern perimeter, not unusual, not alarming. But then the alert came through the signals network. Movement at the wire. Possible hostile activity. Then came the next alert. "They're coming. Everyone to defensive positions." And then, in the darkness of the desert night, with 200 meters of black sand between Outpost Delta and the enemy fighters moving toward their position, the shooting began. The rumors spread through Outpost Delta like dust through a sieve. By the next morning, half the base had some version of a theory about Maya's sealed file. The story mutated with each retelling. She'd been discharged for disciplinary reasons. She'd broken a security protocol. She was being punished with grunt work. By lunch, someone had suggested she might be a spy planted to monitor the platoon. None of it was hostile yet. It was the ambient speculation of soldiers with too much downtime and not enough information. Maya moved through it all unchanged. She showed up to her shifts on time. She maintained her equipment. She ate her meals. If she noticed the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, she gave no sign of it. But Private Warner noticed something else entirely. He'd left his tablet on a bench near the signals room while grabbing water. When he came back 10 minutes later, it was still there, but open to a different screen than he'd left it. Not opened aggressively, not left as some kind of message. Just repositioned, the way someone might do if they'd needed to see what was on it. "Did you touch my tablet?" he asked Maya directly. "No," she said. He believed her, which was somehow worse, because he knew someone had. And in a compartmentalized outpost, you didn't just casually touch other people's equipment. You did it for a reason. "What were you doing over here anyway?" Warner pressed. "My job," Maya said. "Signals monitoring is integrated with communications. The tablet syncs data." It was a technically accurate answer that explained nothing. That same week, Corporal Reeves found her in the training room at 0300 hours, standing motionless in front of a tactical map of the eastern approach to the outpost. Just standing there. Not sleeping, not studying intensely, just observing. When he turned on the lights, she didn't startle, didn't flinch. Just glanced at him calmly and left. What was she doing? Jensen asked when Reeves mentioned it. Looking at the map, but not like normally, like she was memorizing something or calculating. Reeves wasn't good at explaining himself. It was weird. Her eyes were moving, but methodically, not like someone just casually checking something. The details accumulated like sediment, small observations, fragments. Sergeant Carter called her to his office again on the 9th day. This time his desk was clear except for a single book, a field manual on ballistics and rifle marksmanship, military specifications, not standard signals reading material. "This yours?" he asked. "No, Sergeant. It was checked out from the library using your credentials 3 days ago." She didn't answer immediately. Just looked at the book, then back at him. "I read extensively," she said finally. "Different technical materials. It helps with understanding systems and equipment." Carter leaned back in his chair. "Signals operators don't typically need to understand ballistics theory." "I'm thorough," she said. He didn't press further, but after she left, he sat there for a long time, looking at the book, thinking. And later that evening, he went to the personnel files and pulled her folder again. He couldn't read most of it. The classified sections were redacted with thick black lines, but he could see dates, see that her service record before her transfer had a completely different designation, something in the special operations section of the military structure. He was almost certain of it. The redaction was thorough, but not thorough enough to hide everything from someone who'd been in the military long enough to understand how the system worked. He didn't tell anyone, but he started watching her differently, watching and wondering. The mockery continued, but it had shifted. The easy insults about her being weak or inexperienced had stopped. She'd proved herself too competent for that. Now it was subtler. Isolation, exclusion. The soldiers would plan group activities and forget to mention them to her. They'd deliberately leave her off duty rotations that involved social time. It was the kind of bullying that didn't leave marks, didn't give her anything concrete to report. "You coming to the card game tonight?" someone would ask, and she'd say yes, and then somehow she wouldn't get the location, or the game would be rescheduled without her being told. Small humiliations, the kind that accumulated. She never complained, never asked why she wasn't included, never demanded explanations. It was Private Jennifer Cho, the youngest soldier in the platoon at 19, who finally asked a direct question. She found Maya alone in the signals room during a quiet shift and sat down at the adjacent terminal. "Why do you let them treat you like that?" Cho asked. Maya glanced at her but didn't answer immediately. When she did, she was careful with her words. "Soldiers bond through shared experience. I'm not part of that yet. Maybe I never will be. That's acceptable." "It's not acceptable," Cho said. "It's bullshit. They should give you a chance." "I am what I am," Maya said. "I can't change how I present myself, so I don't try." There was something in that answer, some acceptance that seemed beyond just ordinary resignation. Cho wanted to push further, wanted to ask the questions everyone was thinking, but Maya had already returned her attention to her screens. That evening, Cho ran into Sergeant Carter at the water station. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Sure. What's the deal with Rodriguez? Everyone talks about her sealed file, but nobody actually knows anything. And she's treated like an outsider, but she's also the most competent person here. It doesn't add up." Carter considered the question carefully. He couldn't tell Cho anything. The classified designation above his clearance level was a real barrier, not an excuse. But he could acknowledge what she was observing. "Some soldiers have history," he said. "Complicated history. When they get transferred, they come with baggage that can't be discussed. That's all I can tell you." "But she's not a bad person," Cho pressed. "You can tell." No, Carter agreed. She's not. 2 days later, during a routine equipment inventory, one of the soldiers found a notebook tucked into the filing cabinet in the back of the signals room. It wasn't labeled. Inside were detailed calculations, wind speed variables, distance measurements, sightline angles, calculations for the outpost's defensive perimeter from multiple positions. Whoever had made these notes had been methodically analyzing the landscape, the sight lines, the tactical geometry of their own base. The notebook was passed to Sergeant Carter immediately. He looked at the handwriting, then at the calculations, saw immediately that they were accurate. Not just guesses, but precise technical analysis. Someone with serious training had done this. Someone with expertise in things that signals operators didn't typically need to understand. He didn't show the notebook to anyone else. He locked it in his desk drawer and made a mental note to talk to Lieutenant Brennan about increased security protocols. Something was happening at Outpost Delta. Some larger pattern that he couldn't quite see yet. Maya's eyes were harder to read now when he encountered her. Still calm, still professional. But there was something else underneath. A readiness that hadn't been there before. A tension, almost imperceptible. Like someone waiting for something inevitable. The outpost had settled into its routines, patrols, maintenance, the endless vigilance of a desert military installation. But underneath the surface routine, something was building. Tension between the platoon and the quiet woman they didn't understand. Questions about her past. And somewhere in the dark beyond the perimeter, a gathering storm that none of them could see yet. On the 10th night, the first alert came through. Not urgent yet. Just a notification. Movement detected at Checkpoint 7, investigating. Maya was on duty in the signals room when the report came. She acknowledged it, logged it, and continued her work without visible reaction. But her posture had changed. Subtly straighter, more focused. The way someone sits when they're suddenly fully awake. Sergeant Carter noticed. He was passing through and caught that shift in her attention, that almost imperceptible readiness that hadn't been there a moment before. He thought about the calculations in the notebook, the ballistics manual, the way she'd memorized the tactical map at 0300 hours. And for the first time, instead of confusion or suspicion, he felt something closer to clarity. She was waiting for this. The movement at Checkpoint 7 wasn't an isolated incident. By 2147 hours, the monitoring network showed activity at multiple points along the perimeter. Not random, coordinated. Someone was probing the outpost's defenses, testing responses, mapping weak points. Sergeant Carter initiated elevated alert status. Nothing full-scale yet, but everyone moved with purpose now. Weapons were checked, ammunition was distributed. The casual mood of the evening shift evaporated. Maya remained in the signals room, her attention locked on the screens in front of her. The data streams from the perimeter sensors told a story if you knew how to read it. Multiple teams, organized approach. They weren't coming for a quick raid. Lieutenant Brennan came through at 2203 hours, moving quickly between stations. Status? She asked Carter. 7 confirmed movement signatures, he reported. Coordinated advance. They're moving toward the eastern approach, which is our weakest defensive position, Brennan finished. She'd studied this outpost long enough to know its vulnerabilities. All right, get the platoon to defensive positions. Full alert. No one fires until they're in clear sight or we identify hostile intent. Yes, ma'am. Orders transmitted through the signals network. The soldiers moved, not panicked, but efficiently. The way trained personnel moved when they understood the situation was real. Rifles were chambered, magazines were distributed, sandbags were checked. The watchtowers came to life with alert soldiers, scanning the darkness beyond the wire. Maya closed her eyes for exactly 4 seconds. When she opened them again, something had changed in her expression. Not visible to anyone watching. Her face remained neutral, but internally some calculation had finished. She stood up. Where are you going? Carter asked. The eastern approach needs better coverage, she said. The sensors only give us part of the picture. Before he could respond, she was already moving. She grabbed her rifle, a standard M4, nothing special, and headed out of the signals room. Carter didn't stop her. He was starting to understand that stopping her was probably not the right decision. The eastern approach to Outpost Delta was a long stretch of open ground, roughly 200 meters from the perimeter wire to where the terrain began to rise into uneven scrubland. During the day, it was featureless, exposed. At night, it was a black canvas where shapes moved and disappeared depending on the moon. Lieutenant Brennan had positioned her soldiers in defensive lines, the choke point where the approaching forces would have to come through the wire. Heavy machine gun position, rifle positions behind sandbags. Good defensive geometry, but only good if the enemy stayed on the ground and charged forward. These enemies didn't seem to be planning on that. The first volley came at 22:36 hours. Not rifles, but something heavier. A grenade launcher, firing from somewhere in the darkness beyond visual range. The rounds impacted in the compound, not precisely placed, but close enough. Dirt exploded. Metal shrieked. One round hit the motor pool and a fuel container ignited, sending up a column of fire that illuminated the scene in harsh orange light. "Return fire!" Brennan shouted. The soldiers opened up, rifles cracking in controlled bursts toward the muzzle flashes from the enemy positions. But the grenade launcher kept firing, methodical and devastating. Another round, another impact. This time it was closer to the barracks building. "We need to suppress that launcher," Brennan yelled into her radio. "Spotter, do we have eyes on it?" "Negative," the spotter in the north tower responded. "Can't identify position. Range is too far." The launcher fired again. Maya had positioned herself on the elevated platform on the western side of the outpost, an equipment storage shed with a clear sight line to the eastern approach. Not a sniper position, not designed for it, but the highest ground available with a clear view. She'd chambered around and was lying prone across the flat roof, her body perfectly still. Her rifle was not a precision instrument. It was a standard-issue M4 carbine, designed for close-quarters combat and medium-range engagement, effective to about 400 meters with proper technique. Effective beyond that only for someone with extensive training and an intimate understanding of ballistics, wind, distance, and the 1,000 variables that changed a shot from possible to impossible. She could see the enemy position now. Not clearly. They were in dead space, partially obscured by terrain. But she could see the muzzle flash from the launcher, roughly 1,200 meters out. Distance she could calculate in her head. Wind was light, coming from the north-northwest at maybe 6 knots. The trajectory would be flat enough to account for. The shooter would be right-handed probably, standing or kneeling during firing sequence, which meant another grenade launched. This one headed straight for the command post. Maya exhaled completely and became stillness. The shot was executed with the kind of precision that came from 10 years of specialized training, from hundreds of hours in sandstorms and mountains and positions most soldiers never accessed. The mechanics were automatic. Breath control, trigger squeeze. The same technique, repeated until it lived in muscle memory and bone. The round left her barrel at 2,970 feet per second. It traveled downrange, accounting for the distance, the wind, the elevation change. It struck the enemy grenade launcher at the exact moment its operator was loading the next round. The precision was such that it didn't just disable the weapon. It struck the grenade mid-insertion, detonating it internally. The explosion cut through the darkness like a door opening. Not a distant sound, but immediate and catastrophic. The enemy launcher was eliminated. The man firing it was gone. The team supporting him scattered into the darkness. For exactly 3 seconds, there was absolute silence on the outpost. Then Lieutenant Brennan's voice cut through the radio. "Cease fire. Hold positions. Spotter, what the hell just happened?" I don't know, ma'am. Something hit their launcher position. It's gone. Completely gone." Brennan moved quickly through the compound, checking positions, making sure the soldiers were secure. The enemy fire had stopped. Whether that was permanent or just regrouping, she couldn't know yet. But the immediate threat had been neutralized by something that shouldn't have been possible. She found Maya walking back into the compound from the western platform, rifle slung across her body, moving with the same economical calm she'd exhibited for the past 2 weeks. "Rodriguez," Brennan called out. Maya stopped and turned. "Did you fire that shot?" "Yes, ma'am." "From where?" "West platform, 1,200 meters, approximately." Enemy launcher position was observable from that elevation. Brennan stared at her. "That's an impossible shot with a carbine at that range." "Not if you know the variables," Maya said quietly. The lieutenant walked closer, studying her face. "What are you, Rodriguez?" Maya met her eyes. "Right now, ma'am. I'm a private in your platoon who just prevented your command post from being destroyed." It wasn't an answer. It was a deflection. But it was delivered with such absolute certainty that Brennan didn't push further. Not yet. Throughout the outpost, soldiers were emerging from their positions, checking on each other, assessing damage. The attack had been brief, but devastating. The launcher fire had caused injuries. Nothing critical, but enough to keep the medics busy. The real damage was psychological. Everyone had seen the impossible thing. Everyone had understood, on some level, that something was very wrong with their assumptions about the quiet woman from Signals. Private Warner found Jensen a few minutes later, both of them still holding their rifles, both of them looking shaken. "Did you see where that shot came from?" Warner asked. "West platform," Jensen said slowly. "But the distance. No carbine makes that shot. No one makes that shot." Rodriguez did. They both went quiet, processing the implication. In the signals room, Sergeant Carter was already pulling up the security footage from the compound camera, the one positioned to capture the western platform. When he had it queued up, he watched Maya move into position with a soldier's precision, watched her calculate something invisible, watched her take a breath and fire. And when the distant explosion bloomed in the darkness of the recording, he finally understood exactly what kind of soldier had transferred to Outpost Delta. The shot was the kind of thing that got reported up the chain of command immediately. By 0600 hours the next morning, before most of the platoon had finished breakfast, the base commander, Colonel Derek Hayes, was reviewing the security footage in the signals room with his adjutant. He watched Maya take the shot 3 times, each time looking for some explanation, some angle or technique that would make it less extraordinary. By the 3rd viewing, he stopped looking for explanations and started looking for answers. "Who is this soldier?" he asked Sergeant Carter. "Private Maya Rodriguez, sir. Signals operator. Transferred in 2 weeks ago. Get me your personnel file." The file was on Carter's desk within 5 minutes. Colonel Hayes opened it and immediately saw the problem. The first section was readable. Basic information, service record, transfer documentation. Then the second section began, and it was completely redacted. Not partially obscured for operational security. Completely. Every word, every date, every detail, covered in thick black lines. "This is sealed at command level," Hayes said. "Yes, sir," Carter confirmed. "Which means whatever she was doing before signals duty, I don't have clearance to know about it." "Correct, sir." Hayes closed the file and looked back at Carter. "But you know something." Carter was careful with his answer. "I know her behavior is inconsistent with a standard signals operator. I know she has knowledge and training outside her stated job specialization. And I know that shot last night shouldn't have been possible with a carbine at that range unless someone had extensive precision rifle training." The colonel leaned back in his chair. "Get her in here." Maya entered Colonel Hayes' office at 0730 hours. Straight-backed, composed, showing no sign of the attack or the previous night's events beyond a baseline alertness. The colonel was older, mid-50s, with the kind of direct gaze that came from decades of command. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Private Rodriguez, you took quite a shot last night." "Yes, sir." "That shot should not have been possible." "It was difficult," Maya acknowledged, "but not impossible." Hayes didn't smile. He slid her sealed file across the desk. "I don't have clearance to open this, which bothers me, because I command this base. and I have a soldier under my command who just proved she has skills that don't match her job assignment." Maya looked at the file but didn't touch it. "I'm going to ask you directly," Hayes continued, "and I expect a direct answer. What is your background?" She took a moment, and in that moment something shifted in her expression. Not dramatically, but a gate opening just slightly. "I was Special Operations," she said. "Tier 1, Sniper Specialization. 10 years of service in that capacity before I was reassigned." "Why were you reassigned?" "I disobeyed a direct order," Maya said. "During a hostage recovery operation in Yemen, I was ordered to maintain position and provide cover fire. But the target location had civilians, non-combatants, families. The tactical plan didn't account for them. The order would have resulted in their deaths. I made the decision to prioritize civilian protection instead." Hayes listened without interrupting. "I didn't have authorization to make that decision," Maya continued. "I broke chain of command. I saved the hostages, but I violated the order." She paused. "Command had me investigated. I was court-martialed for insubordination, found guilty. I was demoted from my rank and position. I was reassigned to standard infantry rotation." "And then you re-enlisted as a private?" "Yes, sir. It was offered as an alternative to discharge. I took it." Hayes absorbed this, understanding the implications. Tier 1 operators didn't get demoted lightly. The military didn't waste that level of training on standard duty, which meant either she was being punished, actually truly punished, or she was being hidden. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you refuse an order to save civilians?" "Because they were there, sir," Maya said. "The order didn't change that fact. I could have followed it. I could have let them die. But I was trained to make decisions in impossible situations. So I did." There was no defensiveness in her voice, no attempt to justify herself beyond stating what had happened. "Do you regret it?" Hayes asked. "No, sir. Even though it cost you your career." "My career was already defined by that choice," Maya said. "Everything else was just administrative consequence." Hayes studied her for a long moment. Then he slid the file back across the desk. "You're still restricted to your current assignment pending a full security review. That shot last night, it was extraordinary, Rodriguez. But it also created problems. We need to understand what you are and what you're doing here." "Understood, sir." Dismissed. By lunchtime, the story had spread through the entire outpost. Not the classified details, those remained sealed. But the outline. Maya was Special Operations. She'd been demoted and reassigned. She'd deliberately violated orders and refused to regret it. The woman who'd spent 2 weeks being mocked and isolated had, in that single night, revealed herself as something the soldiers had no context for understanding. Private Warner sat with Jensen and Reeves in the chow hall, processing the information in real time. "She's actually a goddamn operator," Warner said quietly. "Like, for real. Not just some competent soldier, actually Special Operations." "And they demoted her and sent her here," Reeves said. "That's crazy. Why would they do that?" "Because she didn't follow orders," Jensen said. "That's the military. You break the chain and they break you." "But she was right," Warner countered. "From what I heard, she was actually right about the civilians. She saved people." "Doesn't matter," Reeves said. "Orders are orders." "That's insane," Warner shook his head. "They took a Tier 1 operator and made her a signals private because she made the right call." The soldiers around them had gone quiet, listening. The news was spreading outward in concentric circles, each retelling adding more certainty, more detail, more awe. Private Cho found Maya alone in the signals room during a quiet moment in the afternoon. "Is it true?" Cho asked. "You were Special Operations?" Maya looked up from her terminal. "Most of it, yes." "And they punished you for saving civilians?" "They punished me for breaking chain of command," Maya clarified. "The fact that I saved civilians was incidental to the charge." "But you don't regret it," Cho said. "It wasn't a question." "No," Maya confirmed. Cho sat down at the adjacent terminal. Absorbing that. The idea that someone could make a choice that cost them everything and not regret it was difficult to understand. But watching Maya, seeing the absolute lack of self-doubt in her face, made it somehow real. "Why are you here?" Cho asked. "At this outpost, I mean. If you were that good, there had to be better assignments." Maya considered the question carefully. When she answered, it was with complete honesty. "This was what I was offered. A reassignment that kept me in the military instead of being discharged. I took it because I still believe in the work, in protecting people, even if the form it takes is different now." "Do you regret re-enlisting?" Cho pressed, "knowing you'd basically be starting over?" "No," Maya said. "I regret nothing. Regret is a waste of mental energy." Sergeant Carter had been listening from the doorway, unseen. He'd come to check on the signal station and found them talking. Now he watched Maya answer Cho's questions with the same calm, matter-of-fact tone she used for everything, as though her entire career hadn't been dismantled, as though being reassigned to an isolated desert outpost as a private soldier was simply another assignment to execute. He understood then that the sealed file, the classified designation, the impossible shot, none of these things were the real mystery. The real mystery was how someone could experience that kind of professional destruction and remain so completely intact. That evening, during the debriefing with Lieutenant Brennan and the platoon, the atmosphere was completely different from what it had been 2 weeks before. The soldiers didn't look at Maya with contempt anymore. They looked at her with a mixture of respect and unease. Respect because of what she'd revealed herself to be. Unease because they didn't understand why someone like that would be here, among them, working a signals job that any competent soldier could do. "Last night, Private Rodriguez demonstrated extraordinary tactical capability," Brennan said formally. "The enemy engagement is under investigation by command. Until that investigation is complete, operational procedures remain unchanged. Rodriguez will continue her current assignment. Questions?" There were no questions, but there were plenty of looks, plenty of calculation happening behind eyes that had finally understood they'd been in the presence of something they couldn't categorize. After the briefing, Warner approached Maya at the equipment rack where she was checking batteries. "That was what you did last night," he said awkwardly. "That was incredible." "Thank you," Maya said, not looking at him. "I'm sorry we gave you shit when you first got here," Warner continued. "We didn't know." "You knew what you could see," Maya interrupted, not unkindly. "Nothing more. That's acceptable." But it wasn't quite acceptable. Not anymore. Because now they all knew there was something more. Something just beyond what they could see. And they'd have to live with that knowledge. With the understanding that they shared a space with someone whose real nature remained just slightly out of reach. The outpost had become a different place than it was 24 hours before. Not through any action Maya had taken beyond one perfect shot in the darkness, but through revelation. Through the slow understanding that among them was someone who had sacrificed everything for principle and regretted nothing. And in a military culture built on following orders, that was the most unsettling thing of all. Part 5. The Decisive Battle and the Choice. The attack came 3 days later, in the pre-dawn darkness when the desert was coldest and visibility was at its absolute minimum. This time it wasn't a probe. It wasn't a harassment raid. It was coordinated, overwhelming, and designed to break the outpost through sheer force of numbers. The first indication came from the perimeter sensors, multiple signatures moving in organized formation from the north and east. Not dozens, hundreds. The signal analysis suggested at least 3 separate assault teams, each with heavy weapons support. The outpost had 60 soldiers. The math was immediate and brutal. "All personnel to defensive positions," Lieutenant Brennan ordered, her voice steady even as she was running casualty projections in her head. "This is not a drill. We are under full assault." The soldiers moved with the muscle memory of training, but everyone understood what they were facing. The outpost's defenses were built for harassment and insurgent activity. Not for a coordinated assault by a force 3 times their size with superior firepower. Sergeant Carter stood in the signals room, watching the sensor data stream across his screens. The enemy advance was methodical, using terrain for cover, moving in coordinated teams. Whoever was commanding them understood military tactics, understood the outpost's layout, understood exactly how to exploit their weaknesses. "Sir," he called to Colonel Hayes, who was coordinating command from the operations center. "They're timing the assault to hit the east and north simultaneously. They're going to try to overwhelm multiple positions at once." The first mortars came in at 04:47 hours. The rounds impacted around the perimeter, not precision strikes, but area suppression, designed to keep the soldiers' heads down and disrupt coordinated defense. One round hit the main ammunition storage, triggering secondary explosions that lit up the pre-dawn sky. "We're taking heavy fire," the North Tower reported. "Enemy forces closing on the perimeter." Lieutenant Brennan was moving between positions, assessing, adjusting. But she could see what everyone could see. They were being attacked by a force they couldn't repel. The enemy had superior numbers, superior positioning, and superior firepower. The only thing the outpost had was terrain advantage and soldiers trained in defensive operations. It wouldn't be enough. Colonel Hayes made a decision that would define the next hours of combat. He found Maya in the signals room, where she'd been monitoring the enemy approach with the same calm focus she brought to everything else. "Rodriguez," Hayes said, "I need you to take tactical command of the defense." It wasn't a question. It wasn't really even a request. It was an acknowledgement that the situation had moved beyond what standard command structure could handle. Maya met his eyes. "Yes, sir." She was in the command post 30 seconds later, reviewing the tactical display, understanding the enemy's positioning, seeing the geometry of the assault the way she'd seen the geometry of that impossible shot. "All position leaders," she broadcast over the radio, her voice clear and controlled. "This is Rodriguez. I'm assuming tactical command. Standard military organization, but I'm reorganizing defensive positions. North positions abandon the heavy line. They're expecting concentrated defense. Instead, create staggered firing positions on the interior perimeter, force them to advance through a kill box rather than assault a line." The platoon leaders started to object, then understood. She was reorganizing the defense not to stop the assault, but to channel it, to make the enemy's numbers a disadvantage rather than an advantage. "East position," she continued. "You're going to appear to break. Fall back in stages, controlled retreat. Draw them deeper into the outpost. Machine gun position moves to the western building. Elevated platform with clear sight lines to the interior courtyard. Let them commit forces into the compound, then compress them." "Private Rodriguez," Lieutenant Brennan's voice crackled through the radio. "Those are unconventional tactics." "Yes, ma'am," Maya acknowledged. "But they're the only tactics that work with our current force disparity. We can't win a direct fight. We can only win by controlling the space and making their numbers irrelevant." The enemy assault broke through the perimeter at 05:03 hours. The soldiers pulled back exactly as instructed, creating the appearance of a broken defense. The enemy forces advanced, confident, pushing deeper into the compound. They expected to encounter desperate defense. Instead, they walked into a series of interlocking fields of fire that had been precisely calculated for maximum effectiveness. Maya was in the command post, calling fire support in real time. "Machine gun position, suppress the north courtyard. Rifle teams on the western building, take the command vehicle on the eastern approach. Sniper team, we have a high-value target moving through the secondary entrance. That's your priority." The soldiers executed her orders with a precision born of understanding that this woman knew what she was doing. The command vehicle she'd identified was the enemy's tactical center. When it was destroyed, the coordinated assault began to deteriorate into smaller, disconnected engagements. But the enemy had overwhelming numbers. For every position the defenders suppressed, another one pressed forward. "We're taking casualty," Sergeant Carter reported. "Medical bay is full." "Accepted," Maya said. "Continue the defense." She moved through the compound herself now, rifle in hand. moving to positions that needed immediate support. At the western building, she took a position with the sniper team, not to give orders, but to add fire. A high-ranking enemy officer was coordinating the assault from a partially covered position. The distance was roughly 800 meters. The angle was difficult. Any standard soldier would have called it a marginal shot. Maya fired. The round struck exactly where she'd calculated it would. The officer went down. The enemy coordination degraded further. The assault continued for hours. Not because the enemy was committed to taking the outpost. They were committed to destroying it. The firepower difference was significant, and they used it relentlessly. But without the numerical advantage they'd been counting on, without coordinated command, the attack began to falter. At 08:47 hours, the helicopter gunships arrived. "All personnel, we have air support inbound," Maya broadcast. "Friendlies at 10 o'clock, approximately 5 minutes out. Enemy forces will begin immediate fallback. Continue suppressing fire until they're beyond effective range." The soldiers understood. They'd held. Not because they were stronger or better equipped, but because they'd been guided by someone who understood how to fight an impossible battle. The enemy forces disengaged, pulling back toward the perimeter, regrouping for a retreat that would take them out of effective range before the air support could engage. The last shot fired was around 09:05 hours. After that, there was a strange, almost shocking silence. The outpost had held. The casualty count was heavy. 3 soldiers killed, 12 wounded. But the outpost stood. The enemy had suffered far greater losses, including at least 1 command-level casualty. By any measure, it was a significant tactical victory for a force that should have been overrun. By 1200 hours, after the wounded had been stabilized and the dead had been secured, Colonel Hayes called Maya into his office. Brigadier General Samuel Morris was there. Command level, arrived by helicopter specifically to evaluate what had happened. Hayes motioned for Maya to sit, but she remained standing. "Private Rodriguez," Morris began, "your tactical decisions during this morning's assault prevented the loss of this entire outpost. You demonstrated command-level strategic thinking, precision fire control, and an understanding of asymmetrical warfare that exceeded what we would expect from someone at your rank." Maya said nothing. She was waiting. "Command has reviewed your service record," Morris continued. "We've decided to offer you restoration of your previous rank, Captain, with an assignment back to Tier 1 operations. Your previous assignment is available. You'll be leading your own team with full operational authority." It was what every demoted officer dreamed of. A path back, vindication, full restoration of status and career. "I refuse, sir," Maya said immediately. Morris blinked. "Excuse me. I refuse the offer, sir. I request to remain as a private soldier in this platoon." "Do you understand what you're refusing?" Morris asked, his voice controlled but clearly shocked. "Yes, sir. I understand completely. I'm refusing it anyway." Hayes leaned back in his chair, watching her. He'd suspected something like this might happen. "Explain," Morris demanded. Maya took a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I was restored to Tier 1 operations before," she said. "I was a weapon in someone's hands, a tool deployed for specific objectives. I made decisions I believed were right, and when those decisions conflicted with orders, I was broken down and cast aside. But the problem wasn't the decision. The problem was that I allowed myself to become a weapon instead of remaining a soldier." She paused, gathering the rest of the thought. "This morning I wasn't commanding from a position of power," she continued. "I was part of a unit. I was making decisions that directly protected the soldiers standing next to me. That's different. That matters. If I go back to special operations, I become a weapon again. A tool deployed by command for purposes I don't fully control. I've already paid the cost of that once. I won't do it again. You understand this refusal will likely end any advancement in your career," Morris said flatly. "Yes, sir." "You understand it means remaining a private soldier indefinitely." "Yes, sir, that's the point." Morris stood up. He looked at Colonel Hayes, then back at Maya. You're a remarkable soldier, Rodriguez. It's a shame the military won't get the full benefit of your capabilities. With respect, sir, Maya said quietly. The military is getting exactly what I'm offering. Everything I have, without reservation. The only difference is that I'm doing it for the soldiers next to me, not for the rank structure above me. Morris left without another word. That evening, the platoon gathered for a formal debrief. Soldier by soldier, they recounted their actions during the assault. When it came to Maya's role, Lieutenant Brennan kept it factual and professional, acknowledging her tactical decisions, her fire support, her leadership during the engagement. After the formal briefing ended, the soldiers didn't disperse. They lingered. And gradually, they approached her. Private Warner was first. "Thank you," he said, "for what you did, for how you led us." "You did the work," Maya replied. "I just helped organize it." "No," Jensen said, joining them. "You did more than that. You saved us." More soldiers gathered. Not in a crowd, but standing nearby, listening, offering quiet acknowledgement. The woman they'd mocked and isolated 2 weeks before had become something else entirely. Not a superior officer, not someone elevated above them, but someone who had stood with them and kept them alive when they should have died. Sergeant Carter stood back, observing. He saw the moment when Maya truly became part of the unit. Not through rank or authority, but through sacrifice and trust. Through the understanding that she had put herself in the middle of that assault, had exposed herself to fire, had made herself vulnerable to protect them. That was the bond that mattered in a combat unit. Not hierarchy, not chain of command. The simple, absolute trust that the person beside you would keep you alive. Later that night, Maya stood alone on the western platform, looking out toward the desert. The place where she'd made that first impossible shot seemed like a lifetime ago now, though it had been only 5 days. Lieutenant Brennan found her there. "You could have taken it," Brennan said. "The promotion, the career restoration, any soldier would have." "I know," Maya replied. "But you didn't." "No." Brennan stood beside her, both of them looking out at the dark landscape. "I think I understand why now," Brennan said. "It's not about the rank. It's about never being a tool again. About staying connected to the soldiers rather than being elevated above them." "Yes," Maya acknowledged. "That's a hard thing to choose," Brennan said. "It's actually the easiest thing I've ever chosen," Maya replied. "Everything before was complicated. This is simple." The desert was quiet. Somewhere out there, the enemy was regrouping, reassessing. Eventually, they would try again. But tonight, the outpost was at peace. The soldiers were alive. The unit was intact. And Maya Rodriguez, former Tier 1 operator, demoted officer, hidden soldier, private, stood with her platoon and looked toward whatever would come next, knowing she'd made the only choice that mattered. Not a choice that restored her to power, but a choice that kept her human.